The American people have been told that Hawaii is on fire, that the Japanese have started an undeclared war, and they are scared, and they are confused, they are angry. The American people reeled with a mind-staggering mixture of surprise, awe, mystification, grief, humiliation, and above all, cataclysmic fury. Americans fairly gnashed their teeth at having been played for suckers. Certain observers, watching cargoes of iron and other strategically valuable materials bound for Japan, had predicted that one day these items would make a round trip in the shape of Japanese bombs. Now the whole country tacitly acknowledged that they had prophesied truly. What angers many the most is that Japan did this while still carrying on negotiations. The sheer dishonesty and duplicitousness of that is galling. There are plenty of people that think this is like Japan's invasion of Manchuria, which was done by the army over the objections of the government. But this time it is not so. But who let them get away with it anyhow? Which Americans are on the hook for not seeing it coming? Already this evening, Naval Secretary Frank Knox plans to go to Oahu and see what's what. Somebody has to take the fall, and we've already sort of seen who it's likely going to be. And America is also concerned about what happens next. A lot of people think not just that Japan is going to attack Hawaii again by air, but that they are actually going to invade and take over the islands. Cooler heads realize that this is unlikely to happen, considering all the other places attacked today, ones that actually make sense to physically invade. But you know, in light of what has happened today, as long as Genda is around, you can't really totally rule out another attack. And of course there will, as you may imagine, be a huge outcry against any and all fifth columnists. Short especially is concerned in this arena. Knox will add to this by saying that Japanese Americans on Oahu are the most effective fifth columnists of the whole war. It seems fairly obvious there are going to be negative repercussions for Japanese Americans in the near future, even though nearly half of the civilians killed here today are of Japanese descent. Suspicions and finger-pointing are already all over as the day unfolds, as we'll see. But Knox, nor anyone else, cannot escape the hard truth, though, that the US was just not alert. And even this morning, all the submarine action, which should have indicated something is going on, just didn't. Knox's reports will carry serious weight, though. Being Secretary of the Navy and writing about naval negligence will do that. But again, the defense of Oahu is actually the Army's responsibility. So what about the Army report? Well, there is not going to be one. Colonel Bundy is sent by the War Plans Division, but he dies in a plane crash en route, so the War Department relies on Knox's report. Secretary of War Stimson knows that the Army is going to have to take a hit too, of course. Both Husband Kimmel and Walter Short will be relieved of their commands on the 16th. The guy tapped to replace Short, Herbert Darg, dies in the same plane crash as Bundy, so Air Corps Lieutenant General De Los Emmons gets the posting. Kimmel will revert to Rear Admiral, and William Pye temporarily succeeds him for 2 weeks until Rear Admiral Chester Nimitz takes over for good. Roosevelt will set up a 5-man commission of 2 Army personnel, 2 Navy, and 1 civilian to investigate responsibility for the disaster. Nimitz thinks that if the Japanese had destroyed the fuel storage tanks, it would seriously delay any future counterattack. Catherine Dillon and Donald Goldstein, Gordon Prang's co-authors of At Dawn We Slept, and Michael Wenger claim one stroke of luck for the Americans on December 7th was the fact that the Pearl Harbor attack plan contained no provision for destroying the Navy Yard. Had the Japanese done so, they would have put the U.S. Pacific Fleet out of action far more effectively than by wrecking individual ships. The fleet would have had no choice but to return to the Pacific coast. Alan Zim does not quite agree with this, doing the math that an attack wave on the Navy Yard would likely destroy no more than 6% of it, and that the destruction of a building does not necessarily destroy its contents, and that civilian facilities at the port of Honolulu could be used for service and repair. But whatever the case, a whole lot of people took a whole lot of pain today.
After I got the morphine, I went back up there. They were bringing the ones in that were critical. They had these 2 rooms in a great big ward. The people that were real sick, they used to put in a room away from the other fellows. I stayed in there and ran the IVs and stayed with them until they died. And then I fixed the bed up for the next patient. They were all young, good-looking kids, and I noticed most of them had beautiful teeth. That's what I noticed the most. Young kids.
The Japanese second wave attack ends now as the last fighters pull away to the rendezvous point. I'd like to talk a bit here about some of the American battleships that we see here today under attack. The introduction of the Nevada class begins the second generation of battleships in the U.S. Navy. Oklahoma is her sister ship, and Nevada is launched in 1914. She is pretty revolutionary for the times. This class is much larger than earlier American dreadnoughts. It displaces nearly 3 times the tonnage of the pre-dreadnoughts and is still more than 8,000 tons greater than the first American dreadnought, Delaware. Instead of coal, the ship's power plant is fired by oil, which makes it more energy efficient, allowing for a much greater range. An increased range and better fuel economy are major demands for the next battleship generation. Increased range is to be able to threaten the Japanese home waters and to defend Manila even from the home ports. The new battleships focus on long-range gunnery, maximum speed and range, and a new kind of protection. The Nevada is the first battleship with triple gun turrets instead of double, so they need no turrets and have decreased weight in the middle of the ship. Nevada class follows the new principle of all or nothing armor protection. Heavy protection over critical areas like engine rooms, turrets, and magazines, but next to nothing over less important areas. Still, over 40% of the displacement weight is armor. Nevada is upgraded with anti-torpedo bulges, better boilers, and AA guns before being moored at port at Pearl Harbor, aft of Arizona. Sister ship Oklahoma is the last ship completed as part of the Naval Appropriations Act, which orders 22 battleships between 1900 and 1911. Like Nevada, the Oklahoma has all of the same improvements in range, speed, protection, and armament. Powered by 12 oil-fired boilers with 2 dual-acting vertical triple expansion steam engines, the Oklahoma has a maximum speed of 20.5 knots at a range of 8,000 miles. She is also outfitted with the new geared turbines instead of the older direct drive ones. Armed with 10 14-inch caliber guns and 21 5-inch caliber guns for defense against smaller vessels, she also has 2 torpedo tubes. The belt armor has a thickness between 8 and 13.5 inches and turret armor up to 16 inches. Oklahoma, with its crew of 864, has been part of the Pacific Fleet since late December 1937, stationed early on at Pearl Harbor. She trains in liaison with the Army units on Oahu and only returns to the mainland for dry dock maintenance. In early 1941, she is upgraded with AA guns and additional anti-torpedo armor. But although she has been repeatedly modernized, her retirement is planned for May 2nd, 1942. That will no longer be necessary after today. Her career is over. Arizona's career is also over. She is the second of the 2 Pennsylvania-class battleships in this Navy. This class becomes the new standard during the First World War and carries on many improvements the Nevada class introduced. Pennsylvania is longer than its predecessors, with an overall length of 607 feet and an increased weight with a displacement tonnage of over 32,000 tons. She is powered by 4 direct drive steam turbine sets, each driving a propeller 12 feet in diameter. Together, they give the ship a top speed of 21 knots. At full capacity, the Pennsylvania is able to go at 12 knots for 7,500 nautical miles. Pennsylvania class houses 14-inch guns and 4 triple turrets. In addition, there are 22 anti-torpedo boat guns in individual turrets around the ship, and this is the first class outfitted with anti-aircraft defenses from the start. They also feature the all-or-nothing armor principle. The major defense is the armored belt at the waterline, 13.5 inches thick, which mainly protects the machinery, magazines, and boilers. There is an additional 3-inch anti-torpedo bulkhead. Pennsylvania joins the fleet at Pearl Harbor January 7th, 1941. Arizona is the second battleship of the Pennsylvania class and is launched in 1915, sharing both the length and displacement tonnage of its sister ship. She also has the same armor protection. Arizona is stationed at Hawaii briefly in 1940 and returns when the decision to permanently keep the U.S. Pacific Fleet based at Pearl Harbor is made. In early 1941, she is overhauled and upgraded with things like radar and anti-aircraft directors. As part of Battleship Division 1 with Nevada and Oklahoma, she returns yesterday from a training sortie. When she explodes today, 1,177 of the 1,512 people aboard lose their lives. One big result of the whole attack is the impact on the perception of American naval officers. How weak are the battleships in reality? Okay, no battleship could be expected to survive as many rapid hits in succession as Oklahoma and West Virginia took, but California and Arizona only took a few hits each. Is this what the future would hold? That they'd send battleship after battleship against the Japanese, only to see them blown up or sunk in minutes? And of course, it is not just the newer fleet. We saw how quickly the dreadnought Utah capsized. Utah is an older ship, launched in 1909, and 58 of her officers and men die today. Hospitalman James Anderson describes,
"He saw the nearby Utah list to port, stop, and capsize to starboard. The heavy timber sluice on the target ship's deck slid to the port side and piled up like jackstraws. The roll to starboard brought them crashing across the deck, crushing some men and throwing others into the water." Anderson watched horrified for a moment. Then he and two shipmates shut by hand a cargo hatch, which normally took an electric winch to close.
Although the ship is beyond all hope, banging from the upturned hull says that there is still someone alive in there. Commander Isquith, along with the chief motor machinist, the water tender, and a regular machinist, traced the noise to the dynamo room. Cutting crews from Raleigh and Tangier arrived, and by now they've made an 18-inch hole and pounded in plating. Out comes fireman John Vasson. When the ship rolled over, he'd made for the bottom with a flashlight and a wrench. When he got there, he had to unscrew the nuts on 20 bolts to get to the outside part of the inner hull. He has had a real piece of luck though. The wrench he brought just happens to be the right size to fit those nuts. 2 minutes ago, Kimmel's headquarters sends out the message that 2 enemy aircraft carriers are operating 30 miles off Barbers Point. Minneapolis is in that area though and knows this is false. They broadcast the message, "No carriers in sight," which is received as 2 carriers in sight. Interestingly enough, 10 minutes ago, Kimmel radioed Halsey, commanding the Enterprise, and told him there were indications that the enemy was to the northwest. As the day rolls on, these various leads and many others will all be followed up, but there's a bit of a tendency to ignore the actual evidence of where the Japanese are, or at least where they were. Squad leader Landon tells people about the strange planes he saw all flying north when he was bringing in his B-17 an hour and a half ago. And hey, Opana Mobile Radar Station has a pretty good story to tell about that giant blip that came in from the north. But when the Navy asks if they have any information, nobody seems to know anything. And you may be thinking, hey, wouldn't the radar station track aircraft leaving the island as well? And you'd be right, they did. Opana carefully plotted all of the planes leaving the island, and the information center was fully manned, but nobody did anything with the information. But the word of the attack is spreading far and wide. At the Polo Grounds in New York, the Giants, the football Giants, are playing their last game of the season. It's against the Brooklyn Dodgers, the football Dodgers, not the baseball ones, obviously. The Dodgers will win the game 21-7, but will end the season in second place, a game behind the champion Giants. The kickoff by the visiting Dodgers is caught at the Giants' 3-yard line by Ward Cuff, who returns it to the 27. The play-by-play radio announcer is cut off, describing the tackle, though, with, "We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor." The attack is eventually announced in Japan as well, where it is now the morning of December 8th. Half an hour from now, Ambassador Grew will be awakened and summoned to Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo's official residence. Togo met with the emperor 3 hours ago, 3 hours after Grew demanded an audience with the emperor. The emperor says there will be no audience for Grew to hand over Roosevelt's letter, but tells Togo to tell Grew to tell Roosevelt that the establishment of peace in the Pacific, and consequently the world, has been the cherished desire of His Majesty. Togo thanks Grew for his work, but does not tell him about the attack. Grew finds out a few hours later. A Japanese official arrives at the embassy and gives a note to the first secretary addressed to Grew. It says, "Excellency, I have the honor to inform Your Excellency there has arisen a state of war between Your Excellency's country and Japan beginning today." The Japanese confiscate the shortwave radios in the embassy and lock the gates. The Americans begin burning the files. Joseph Grew has been the U.S. ambassador to the Empire of Japan since 1932. Back in January, he wired state a rumor he heard from Peru's minister to Japan that Japan's military plans a massive surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in case of trouble with the United States. Grew and all his diplomats in Japan are now interned. He's not the only one who isn't able to go home. The Stagners try to return home, but they're not allowed to. They head for the sugarcane fields at Waimano Home Road in the hills above Pearl Harbor, where they encounter scores of other families that have also fled the carnage of Pearl. But for those injured in the attacks, it often is a big problem moving them. Moving a badly injured or burned sailor from a flooding or burning ship while still under attack is anything but easy, especially to reach proper medical care. But you know what? The Navy is actually pretty well prepared medically for the events of the day. Over the past 2 years, Naval Surgeon General Ross McIntyre has overseen a big expansion of the Bureau of Medicine and Surgery. Facilities at Pearl grew overcrowded last year, so they've added bed capacity, supplies and equipment, and trained local personnel. They also have the Solace, of course, but they also have the Navy's second mobile base hospital there. And the medical department of the Argonne, together with personnel from other ships, starts receiving wounded at its dock. 150 cots are set up, but they will soon be moved to the Officers Club in the Navy Yard. And by 10:30 this morning, a field hospital, manned and equipped by the Argonne, is set up. Their dock will still be a clearing station, though. The most severely wounded patients go to the Naval Hospital, the others to the Mobile Base Hospital or to the Officers Club.
The corpsmen were overwhelmed with the number of patients that they had to take care of. They were trying to give some first aid to everyone and also trying to determine who needed it the most. When I came in, a corpsman said, "Sit down and wait, we'll get to you." I thought, I want to see what happened to my face. So I started making my way over to a mirror. The corpsman said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I want to take a look at myself." He said, "You'd better not. Go back and sit down." I said, "No, I'm going to have a look." That was a shock. My face was black. My hair was burnt off. I was a pretty sorry sight. Well, I was in pain, but not to the point where I was incapacitated. Pretty soon I began to have chills, uncontrolled chills, and then they began to administer aid to me. They wrapped me in blankets, and my condition began to go down rapidly. They ran out of room, of course, in the sick bay, so they took a compartment in the next deck below and they put us in there. I went down and got into a bunk down there, and then I began to feel pretty rotten, pretty bad.
Oglala finally sinks. Her story begins in 1907, originally commissioned as the Massachusetts. Just this year, she becomes the flagship of Rear Admiral William Furlong, Minecraft commander of the battle force for the American Pacific Fleet. None of her crew are killed today, though 3 have been injured in the attacks. Across the channel, it is pretty much time, or even past time, to abandon the West Virginia. The fires are still raging out of control around the foremast and the conning tower. There are men on the bridge, though, trapped by the fires. They get a hose going and a line down to the men, and they climb up to the deck. Victor Delano is cut off from the rest. For him to get away, he climbs across the searchlight platform and uses the turrets as a ladder to make his way to the deck. He jumps overboard and swims to Ford Island to safety, ahead of the burning oil on the water. There are only a few Japanese stragglers patrolling the skies now, and by this time, ship after ship is preparing to leave, or is leaving, Pearl Harbor to see what's out there on the open seas. Exactly 10 minutes ago, the destroyer Blue locked onto an enemy submarine. This is from Blue's logbook. 9:50. Good sound contact on submarine. Maneuvered to attack and dropped 4 depth charges. Regained sound contact on same submarine. Dropped 2 depth charges. Investigated and observed large oil slick and air bubbles rising to surface. It is felt that this submarine was definitely sunk. Obtained 3rd contact on a submarine that was apparently headed for St. Louis, which was at the time heading, of course, approximately 150 true at high speed. 2 depth charges dropped, and upon return noticed large oil slick on surface. It is claimed that 1 and possibly 2 submarines were sunk. St. Louis spots the conning tower of the sub as well as 2 torpedoes in the water heading for her. They hit a reef, however, and explode 200 yards away. St. Louis fires back with her 5-inch battery. They think they hit the conning tower, but they're not certain. In 7 minutes, she'll set a zigzag course to the south. This is the last major ship combat action today at Pearl Harbor. Of course, there is still all sorts of action on all sorts of ships everywhere on Oahu. The weird flotilla is still cruising the harbor, and even aboard the ships that have been sunk, there's a lot going on. In the Upside Down, Oklahoma, a bunch of sailors are in the dispensary. They're in water with about 3 feet of air above their heads. For the first hour they're here, they don't even try to get out. They figure someone will come to get them and they can hang on to coamings here without constant swimming. One of them has a flashlight and they're trying to sort out exactly where they are, but the tiled ceiling is really the deck. They don't know that they're upside down. One of them's foot kicks a porthole, and as the air starts to go bad, they soon realize they don't have any choice about staying or leaving. They actually discover that the ship is upside down from the hang of the porthole, and one man has to go down and hold it for the next to squeeze out. Some of them are unfortunately too big to squeeze through. Just after 10, survivors reach the surface and are picked up by cruising launches. The men are amazed by the scene more than by their escape. They figured that their ship is the only one damaged. Lights and power are lost on the California again around now, and it does not look like her crew will have a problem abandoning her. A minute ago, 10:02, Captain Bunkley gives the order, and the men head ashore. 10 minutes from now, though, the wind will blow clear the burning oil, and he'll try to get everyone to go back aboard to fight the fires. His pep talk to the men doesn't seem to work, but when a couple of the men raise the colors on the fantail, they all cheer and go back on board to work. Over at Nevada, 3 tugs are now working on her, straining to prevent her from drifting into the channel and sinking too deeply to be salvaged. The ship's plotting room is being used as an information center, and the news is all bad. They know about Oklahoma and Arizona, and now the radio says the Japanese have landed on Diamond Head. They've taken Waikiki. Arizona survivors at the Navy receiving station say that 40 Japanese transports are at Barbers Point. At the Navy Yard, the news is that the North Shore, it's already lost. At Schofield, they hear that they and Wheeler are going to get hit bad in half an hour. In fact, report after report after report only adds to the confusion. But people are reacting not just based on fear. This is the best intel available as far as they know. It's official sources too. An official Army circuit at Kaneohe reported sampans landing troops at Navy ammunition depot. Transports to the north. 8 enemy battleships 70 miles away. The Navy's harbor circuit was just as active. On the Vestal, radio man John Murphy logged in messages that Japanese troops were landing on Barbers Point. Paratroopers dropping in Nuuanu Valley. Honolulu's water supply had been poisoned. This is authentic traffic reported from their logs, by the way, and it has an effect. Reports begin spreading that the local Japanese and Japanese Americans are rising up. They're not, but the stories spread faster than they can be disproved. And there are a lot of reports that have to do with milk deliveries, strangely enough. Yeah, milk deliveries. On the Swan, the story is that Japanese drivers making milk deliveries at Pearl have concealed transmitters to guide in the planes. Others hear that this is actually at Hickam, and those drivers drove up and down the hangars, knocking the tails off all the planes. Radio man Douglas Eaker hears that the sides of the truck drop down, and then the Japanese drivers machine gun the whole field. And the fact that nobody can use the phone or the telegraph leads many to believe it is the Japanese that have cut the wires. It does take time, however, before anyone thinks about the Japanese consul on Oahu, Nagao Kita. During the year, he's received instructions from his government to gather info about the fleet schedule and the air bases. One reporter from the Honolulu Star Bulletin went to the consulate not long after the attack began, but Kita said he didn't even believe there was any attack. Well, the reporter, Lawrence Nakatsuka, went back to his paper's office, and when the extra edition of the paper comes out, he goes back to the consulate with evidence. The police finally decide they should check on the consulate, and Lieutenant Yoshio Hasegawa, the highest ranked officer of Japanese ancestry, goes there with 2 cars full of police. Kita, at this point, is just hanging out in the backyard with the reporter. Hasegawa and Kita go into the building, and there's smoke coming from behind a door. The police open the door to find 2 men burning documents in a washtub. Searching the premises, they find other men getting ready to burn 5 huge sacks of torn papers. These are confiscated, and the staff is confined to one room of the consulate. Kita says he had no advance knowledge of the attack. Neither, of course, did the local Japanese community. And they've had some close calls in terms of revenge. There's even a story going around that the army plans on rounding them up and killing all of them and leaving the women to starve. 5 Japanese civilians are spotted at one point by a truck carrying ammunition. The truck stops, and one of the sailors on the truck wants to kill them all. That seems like it actually might happen until another one finally says, "These guys have nothing to do with the attack." The sailors drive away. An hour and 40 minutes from now, a young Japanese man will ride his motorcycle up to Fort Shafter. He is a messenger delivery guy, and he picked up his cables to deliver at 7:30. None of them were marked urgent, so he delivered them in the order he saw fit. As he's gone about his job, he has seen the planes fighting in the sky and seen the explosions, so he knows what's going on. It would be pretty hard not to, but hey, war or no war, he has a job to do. When he gets close to Fort Shafter, though, there's a roadblock manned by the National Guard. They tell him to go home and that his uniform makes him look like a Japanese paratrooper. He tries another route and runs into a police roadblock that's only letting defense workers through. He shows them his message addressed to Commanding General, and eventually they let him through. Once at the fort, he has no trouble though. The sentry waves him on in. He goes to the message center, leaves the cable, and his work here is done. The message is in code, and by the time it is decoded, it is nearly 3 in the afternoon. It goes to the adjutant, who gives it to General Short, who sends copy to Admiral Kimmel. It's from General Marshall in Washington, D.C., and was stamped for transmission at 1 minute past noon there, which was 6:30 here. It was received in Honolulu at 7:33, about 20 minutes before the attack began. The message says that the Japanese are presenting an ultimatum at 1 o'clock Washington time, 7:30 local time, and adds, "Just what significance the hour set may have, we do not know, but be on the alert accordingly." Kimmel says to the courier who brings it to him, "It is not of the slightest interest," and he throws it in the trash can.